of God.
The wind of God.
On you. You are destroyed forever, and you'll never be back.
It may get bigger, it may get a little bigger, it may not get bigger at all. We'll see what happens. But regardless of what happens, we're totally prepared.
All right. Well, hello, everyone. I am Billy Dees. Thank you for checking out the podcast. A lot of stuff being said about COVID-19 out there in the public domain. And what we're going to do today is we're going to try to have a discussion about this. And I say try because it's a shame that this issue has become a political football as much as it has become a medical issue. If you've never checked out our program before, we are primarily an interview and a commentary podcast. You can find the Billy Dees podcast pretty much on all of the major services, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio. The list goes on. Sitting in with me today is a guy I've worked with in the past on other shows. I'm always happy to have him on the show, Jack Casey. What's going on, Jack?
Not much, buddy. How you been?
As I said, Jack and I have worked before, and one of the reasons why I kind of felt it was a good idea to have Jack on the program was, well, first of all, he's a pretty smart guy, and the second of all is he don't hold back when it comes to opinions. And as I said, we're going to talk about COVID-19 today, and let me kind of set the stage. As the host of the show, I just want to, from the perspective of the show itself, my position has always been that COVID-19 is a real issue. Okay, no one should be minimizing it, and I want to make sure that anything we talk about today on today's program does not do that. We're going to talk about a lot of things, and we can't frame everything perfectly for every little syllable that we utter. But I just want to make sure that people understand that this is a real issue. And what we're going to talk about is what's going on in society as our safety gets balanced against what we might consider our civil liberties. And the longer this goes on, the longer this is going to play out and become more of an issue, in my opinion. I want to state up front, too, that I know a lot of people make comparisons to the flu and other diseases, trying to minimize this. And the issue is this. Here again, the policy in terms of how I regard this as a serious issue is that one of the big differences between COVID viruses and the flu is that this one in particular is very unpredictable. The flu, even a bad strain, it stays in a certain lane, okay? We can't allow COVID-19 to run just through a healthy population, what we consider to be a healthy population, because every time it adopts a new host, it has the potential to become more dangerous. Okay. And I know people have compared this to heart attacks and other things, how many people die of heart attacks, but heart attacks aren't contagious. So that's why we have to, we have to remember that this is a serious thing. But in the long term, what impact does it have, and how do we measure risk against getting on with our lives? How do we measure that? So that's kind of where we're going into this. Let me start with Jack by saying, what has been your general impression as this has unfolded over the last month or two?
Well, I've been kind of on the front lines of it because I'm a grocer. Really? I work in a deli for a store I'm not going to name. And
sure.
When it first started happening, we like back in January-ish, it was kind of a blip on the news, as you may have noticed. Like, people were saying, oh, there's this virus, but it's out in China. Yeah. And it's killed a few people out there, and it wasn't really treated as that big of a deal. But when the governor started making his announcements and shutting things down, that led to one of the most chaotic scenes I have ever seen in my 10 years in retail. I mean, I've never seen anything like it. We were like a weekend busy, like for an entire week straight. Our shelves were wiped out of everything. I mean, you ever seen those pictures of Argentina right before the oil dollar collapsed down there? When all that is what my store looked like. And this is a store that we keep very well stocked, and just, I don't know, people panicking. And then one of the bigger turning points for it was when the restaurants and bars were announced as closed.
Right.
I am fortunate that I am deemed an essential worker, quote unquote, and that my life hasn't really changed much. But I had like more than one waitresses and bartenders at my counter, like in tears, because they don't know what they're going to do. I mean, these people live paycheck to paycheck. They don't know when the place is reopening, whether or not they're going to still have a job at the time, whether or not the place of business will still be open. And it was really quite painful to watch. I mean, the people just hoarding stuff. Like interestingly enough, the first thing to go was the toilet paper, which everybody makes jokes about, which myself included, because I think hoarders are idiots. But I was seeing people walking around. This one woman had 2 full shopping carts stacked as tall as I am, and I'm about 6 foot. I'm 5'11", with pack of toilet paper. Yeah. Nothing else in her cart. I mean, one would expect, when trouble arises, that you're going to see more bottled water sales, or you're going to see more non-perishable food sales, which did happen after about a week. But for the first week or so, it was all hand sanitizer, but no soap, interestingly enough. And hand sanitizer also was not an antiviral, but it was toilet paper and paper towels. So, and one joke that me and a coworker of mine had was, how much crapping are these people planning on doing in the next, 6 months or
exactly.
Month or so, but just the overall panic and just the store just being flooded with people. And since it's happened, I mean, our new store opening got disrupted. We were supposed to open actually in about a week, and now we're pushed back to August, maybe September, because of the 6 foot thing. You cannot have a grand opening of a store that's highly anticipated throughout the community with the 6 foot thing, and people already don't respect it. So, I mean, I got to tell customers all the time, 6 feet, and, they get mad at me, and I'm like, well, I mean, this is what I have to do. This is what my higher ups in corporate and everything have told us we have to do. I have to tell you that. Just people in general.
And that's fair. Have you had any what I would call maybe scary experiences? Like, for example, somebody just coughing and hacking all over the place and won't stand back or anything like that?
Oh, people coughing and hacking. I mean, I'm one of those types who just doesn't really live his life in fear. I mean, people coughed and hacked and touched stuff before. They're going to continue to do it, whether or not this thing is a thing. I just hope more of them. And I find it funny, too, that it seems like nobody washed their hands until they were told to, because of this whole pandemic thing. Because it's just how dirty are some of you guys walking around. I haven't really been in fear of that. It's been more of just having customers kind of like freak out about stuff. Like, I had one customer yell at me, like actually yell at me for breathing, not breathing on his food, but breathing in general. And I'm like, dude, okay, tomorrow I'll remember to bring the scuba suit and I'll keep you safer. Okay. And the funny part was, do you know what Shipt is?
No, I don't know what that is.
It's a grocery pickup and delivery service. It's kind of like Uber Eats or DoorDash, except you're doing grocery shopping.
Okay.
My store is one of the stores that does.
Oh, I got you. Okay.
And so one of the ladies that does Shipt, who isn't an employer or an employee of my company, just went, "Man, what an a-hole." And actually said the word right with an earshot of the guy. The guy looked over. He's like, "I'm not an a-hole." And
oh, man.
So I haven't had as many Karens as usual, which is kind of surprising because in times of stress,
well, that's good, right?
Be worse. Just I haven't seen that many people openly like hacking and coughing either. I mean, it's been maybe like a once a day thing, but
right.
And interestingly enough, too, I have had a customer complaint saying that I was sick. But the thing is, this time of year, with the temperature fluctuates up and down, I just have a sinus headache.
Oh, yeah, sure.
So I'm always a little sniffly, and I'm actually better today because the temperature's a little bit higher. It's not as dry out. But, so people just being paranoid. Whereas, maybe 3 months ago, nobody would have batted an eye to be sniffling.
Sure, yeah. So, and this time of year, allergies, everything's blooming and all these other things. And a lot of people might have a slight cough or, like you say, some nasal congestion. And it's very hard to be around that without having that little alarm bell go off in your mind. Like, is this something I need to worry about?
Right.
So, yeah. it's something that we haven't really had to deal with before. So a lot of people are experiencing these concerns for the first time.
Right. And I don't know, it's just the way people, like, one thing is I've had people actually thanking me for coming up to doing my job, which I find very strange. Like the first time it happened, I was like, I did a double take. I was like, excuse me? You know, because I've
done that.
Deli meat, you know, I mean, I appreciate it. I'm just saying it was weird because in 10 years of in 10 years of doing what I do, not once has anybody ever thanked me for doing my job. You know, it's really, it just kind of threw me back. I felt like I was some kind of weird veteran or something, you know? And
well, you know, essentially a lot of them are, because these are things that people need. People need food, and somebody has to work and provide it. And so absolutely, I when I went through the line about a week or so ago, there's a young lady there that I got acquainted with her only because I it's the regular place that I go.
Right.
And I asked her how she was doing and all this. And before I left, I said, I really, appreciate you, standing on the front line, staying where you are and doing what you do. And I kind of got the impression that she appreciated that.
Right.
And in comparison with getting the grief that I'm sure a lot of them do, like you had, mentioned with the people worrying about how you're touching something or whatever. So, I don't have an issue with that at all. I understand that. Yeah.
See, customers being overly nice to me, since I'm so used to getting like spit on pretty much, is like, it just kind of throws me a bit. I'm not used to it. So like, you're thanking me for doing something. I'm like,
I perfectly understand.
What's your motive? That's weird. Stop it.
Exactly.
But, one thing that I've noticed too, a lot of these retail places and everything have been trying to get a lot of PR thumbs up and everything by saying, oh, well, we're paying an extra $2 an hour. Well, in my experience and many other people's experience, we were first like, oh, great. I can maybe put some extra money away, or, I won't have to struggle this month.
Yeah.
Well, they cut our hours, and a lot of chains have done that. So a lot of us are actually bringing home less than we did before we got these so-called hazard pay raises, and it sucks.
Oh,
so that's one. So you see these companies seeing that, but you don't see anybody else pointing that out. And I want to be one to point that out.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying I'm not bad mouthing my employer. I'm just saying that's been the reality of things, and getting money cut like that,
absolutely,
especially when you're at risk every day of being sick. I mean, it's like they don't really they pretend to care, but they don't. But you do it.
Well, unfortunately, sometimes that is the case.
Our sales numbers have gone down a bit since I think everybody realized they spent all their money on toilet paper. But I'm picturing some of these people like building forts with it, like with little AK-47s behind it, waiting to fight the Rona or something. But it's
my guess is that with everybody on budget, they're only buying the essentials, whether it be eggs or bacon or whatever it is, and a lot of the other stuff, all the fancy things they might be cooking or trying out new recipes and all these other things are probably getting put aside inside the store. I've noticed, that there's the extra panel, there's the extra this and that. And I think these are all good things. But by the same token, I have noticed that the media, and I wanted to get your opinion about this because I know you follow that. There has been a certain amount of sensationalism involved with this. Every half hour, every hour, there's always this breaking news, and things just don't change that much from minute to minute regarding this issue. They don't. And they have a lot of people on there who may be very much an expert, but nonetheless, they are speculating about the future. And some of these speculations can get pretty grand. How do you feel that has impacted? Have you noticed that, first of all? And how do you feel that has impacted the issue?
I've noticed that it's scared people more than it should. I mean, first of all, one thing that they don't point out when they talk about like, X number of COVID deaths. Me and you live in a Northeast Ohio, which is kind of a rural area. I live closer to Akron. I don't know what part of Canton you live in. I've never been to your house, but a lot of these deaths, like the vast majority of them, are happening on the coastal cities and in cities in general. And then the vast majority of those deaths are the elderly, people who already have immunocompromised issues, people with cancer, people, stuff like that. And they're counting everything, even if the person died of like cancer or whatever, as a COVID death, which seems to me to be lying with statistics in order to scare people into tuning into your show or reading your blog or whatever you would call it. And I honestly think that a lot of people who aren't really that at risk, I mean, if you're below, 50, you have like a 0.0003% chance of dying. Like, you have a better chance of getting killed in a car accident on your way to work than you do. But everybody's treating it like, oh, I'm the next one to get it. Like it's some kind of weird zombie pandemic or something. I really don't like some of the language that's been used with it. Like, basically, and as I said, I'm one of those people who just doesn't live in fear. I don't choose to live my life like that. Because, I mean, if you're going to live in fear every single day, then what's kind of the point of living? I mean, like, why leave the house? Why do any of that? And it bothers me to see a profit motive in an industry that entirely gets its money from scaring the crap out of people when, you know, if you're over 60, over 70, sure, you should worry about it. I mean, I'm not saying don't. I'm just saying, but if you're younger, as far as things that can kill you or things that, you know, are going to majorly disrupt your life, like, say, losing your job randomly out of nowhere, it really shouldn't be even in your top 50. And the media is acting like it should be. Like, you should have COVID on your mind 24/7. Like, oh, don't touch that doorknob without a cloth or a cloth. You don't know who's been licking it or any of that. Yeah. There's other stuff going on in the world that I feel warrants more this 24/7 publicity than, you know, this illness that we have going on. Like, I almost got killed on my way to work the other day because I got to go to the news store because I'm officially an employee of the news store to clock in and get my temperature checked and all that, which I think is a pain in the ass, but, you know, whatever. Yeah. It's what they want to do. They pay me they pay me like 30 minutes a day to listen to podcasts and smoke a cigarette on my way to the other store. So whatever. I don't care. I just wish that, you know, seeing the news do that, especially after, like, say, terrorist attacks or, you know, that kill, like, I believe that mass shootings are terrorist attacks. They absolutely 100% are.
Oh, of course they are. Sure.
They don't call them terrorist attacks, but they are. But then they spend like a week, you know, reporting on the crazy guy who killed, like, you know, 6 people in a bar or whatever it is, and acting like, you know, you're next. You're the next one who's going to go to Walmart and get his brains blown out when you're trying to buy toilet paper. And they don't really focus on the fact that it's a big country. It's a big world. I mean, statistically, these are lightning strikes. And
the only wild card is, like I mentioned at the top of the program, is there's always a chance that when this passes from one healthy person to another, and let's say it goes through 10 people and has little impact on them, they have what you might consider cold symptoms or flu-like symptoms for a few days. But eventually this virus, it's almost the work of science fiction. Any virus is. Any virus, as I'm sure you well know, is more closely related to the structure of DNA than it is a germ.
Yeah, viruses,
a germ is actually a complete organism.
Viruses aren't really considered living organisms, are they? Scientifically?
That's a good question. Technically, I believe they are, but they do lean on a host.
Right.
Okay. And one of the reasons why you had mentioned hand sanitizers aren't antivirals. One of the reasons why soap works is the structure of most viruses is held together by a gel. It's like a greasy gel. Okay. Right. And they're closely related to DNA or RNA, probably more specifically. The grease cutting value that soap has with dishes also breaks apart the structure of the virus.
Yep.
So that's why it works good on that. But viruses, when they're out in the environment, are easy to kill. Nobody questions that. But the problem is, once they get in you, they are very hard to find.
Right.
And this particular one is a wild card in that we don't know what it can do. For example, in Italy, younger people were getting it at a much higher rate. And they were afraid that it might have evolved into something slightly different. And that's where the danger is in not restricting the passing of this virus, is you don't know. It's almost like a science fiction alien, as it goes from one person to another, it learns.
That's true with any microbiotic pathogen, though. Bacteria can become antibiotic resistant because of natural selection. The antibiotic
absolutely, sure,
only kills
absolutely. Yep.
X number. The ones that survive are now resistant, and those are the ones that breed. And viruses act in very much the same way. And the thing is, too, of course, it's going to mutate. I mean, even like the flus that go, through society every year mutate and turn into something else. And And I mean, that's the thing too, is that illness is a thing that we deal with, and we've dealt with it since humanity first came out of Africa. And I mean, to treat it, and that's one of my problems with how the media is handling this, is they're treating this like it's some kind of brand new thing. I mean, people get sick and die every day. Yeah. And a lot of as I said, a lot of these people who are catching the COVID, or catching the coof, as I've been calling it, who have been dying, or even who have been younger, who have been dying, have been people who have been morbidly obese, or not taking care of themselves, or, asthmatic and not taking, proper precautions, stuff like that. And so then the media is not really pointing any of that out. I haven't seen a single news report say that, a lot of these people who are, casualties of it also had this other thing. I mean, it's kind of like when you say, okay, remember when they legalized pot in like Colorado or Washington, and they said like car accidents or DUIs or whatever are going up. Well, what they weren't, and it's because of marijuana. Like, these people have marijuana in their system. Well, a lot of cases too, the people are on other things, like say pills like Percocet, or they're drunk. But because the pot was also in their system, suddenly that's the thing that caused it. And they're doing the same thing with COVID. And that's one of my huge pet peeves that I have. And they just do it. They're doing it, and they're just amplifying it and saying, this person, let's not mention that they weighed 450 pounds and ate like 6 McDonald's cheeseburgers a day and already had trouble breathing. It was the COVID. Yeah. And I find that very irritating and very disingenuous too. I mean, so I got you. I know where you're going with this, and we're not. And we should point out, we're not saying that these people are expendable just because they're in a compromised position. But just to accurately describe the lethality of it, we should point out that most of the deaths have been with people who are in a weakened state. Yeah, and that's the thing, they're smudging the numbers. It's not like a perfectly healthy person one day had someone cough in their face and drop dead 7 days later. That's never happened. Yeah. And if it did, the media would be all over that too. Like, there's this instant death plague. That's like, you remember that movie Kill Bill Volume 2? Have you ever seen that? Oh, sure, yeah. Where she does the 5-finger thing on David Carradine's character at the end. He takes 5 steps and his heart explodes. I mean, that's kind of how they're treating this virus. They're saying, you catch it, you're dead. And that's not true at all. The recovery rate has actually been quite high. Well, I was going to say, by the same token, we have a lot of people out there who are making it more out, just something more than what it is by sensationalizing it. And I believe the media is by chasing ratings, as you said, are sensationalize this by constantly having breaking news on the subject every half hour. And that's a whole nother subject. This breaking news thing. No, it's the news. 99.9% of the time, whatever they're talking about that's breaking news is news. Right. To me, something that's breaking news is, one, that's happening in real time, and 2, is fluid. Okay. And, talking about what Congress passed at 2:00 in the afternoon on the 6:30 news is not breaking news. That's news. Breaking news is there's everything's a man breaking news tower in downtown Cleveland capping people. That's breaking news, not, another person died today. And I mean, if they're going to cover every single person who died, then we're going to have like 26 CNNs. Yes. Well, by the same token, though, there's a lot of misinformation out there that is growing like wildfire. Oh, no, and the situation. Some of the conspiracy theories. Well, the conspiracy theories now are off the charts. They're being that maybe it was a designed virus. There's other people who claim that the vaccine, when it becomes available, is going to become part of a tracking system. What's your favorite one? And then this is how I misunderstood you. I would have to say my favorite one is that by virtue of the fact that the vaccine is going to be part of some sort of a tracking system, it is the mark of the beast. That's my favorite one. Okay. My favorite one is that is the my favorite one is the one Bill Gates wants to have you all microchips so he can track you at all times. And yet nobody talks about Mark Zuckerberg. Yeah, and those two kind of yes. And first of all, if they're implying, the way I understand it, that the microchip is going to be hidden in the injection,
Okay, hidden in the vaccine. You're going to have a needle that's probably about the size of a roofing nail,
Right?
because those chips are not that small, not yet.
I'm just going to save them time and carve like an SD slot in my arm or something. I mean, why not?
Yeah. Yeah, the Bill Gates and the mark of the beast have gotten folded together, because a lot of people say that he is assisting or is the Antichrist.
Right, like since when is Bill Gates become the Antichrist? Have you noticed that? It's like,
yeah, the one billionaire who's actually doing some good in the world, giving away billions, and I say billions with a B, dollars, giving them away, has become the Antichrist. I mean, this comes straight from the book of No Good Deed Goes Unpunished.
Oh, I know.
That's what this comes from.
I had a customer, I swear to God, actually go off on the Bill Gates thing the other day. And I couldn't laugh at him. But it was one of the funniest things I've ever heard.
Yeah.
I'm like, dude, you really think Bill Gates cares that much about you here in Ohio that he wants to have you chipped and track your every movement? Was he going to steal your credit card or something to add to his billion?
Yeah,
I mean, really? Come on, dude.
Yeah, the whole thing there is, I'm going to put this disclaimer out here, because I'm going to get labeled as somebody who is anti-religious, and that is not where I'm going with this. There are plenty of people on the left who are social justice warriors who are just as nuts over this as the people on the extreme right. And from the people on the extreme right, from the extreme religious groups out there, is where the other end of the spectrum is. And we could go back through history and we could talk about transplants. We're met with resistance from the religious community.
Oh, yeah.
Anything involving stem cell research. We could go on down a whole list of things here that the religious community has stood in the way of. And now there's this thing about separation of church and state, that the state shouldn't be telling them that they can't get together and have church. And the other part of it would be what I just alluded to, was the whole mark of the beast thing, and that any type of inoculation is going to be something involving a new world order, which of course is prophesized as one of the. So anyway, I would presume that you and I are in agreement that COVID-19 is simply the latest sign of the apocalypse.
Oh, of course. I've been actually wishing people a happy apocalypse.
What have you really?
Yeah, I have.
That's a good one. I'm going to have to remember that one. Happy apocalypse.
Only the customers are the humor I do that with, but I'll be like, "Hey, see you later, dude. Happy apocalypse." Yeah. Usually I get a laugh, so what's your opinion? How do you reason with a religious post here? I'll give an example. A religious post here tried to flip what the pro-choice movement says about my body, my choice, and they tried to flip it and say that if I want to go to my church and expose myself to COVID-19, well, it's my body, my choice. That doesn't hold water, because abortion isn't contagious. No.
And here's the issue. And here's the thing with these churches that, and I want to point out that most churches are being responsible. They're doing their services on the online and all these other things. Most of them are. But the issue is they want separation of church and state. They claim separation of church and state. But when one of them gets this virus and they start spreading it around and they can't breathe, they're going to call 911, and state people are going to have to expose themselves to this. First responders are going to have to expose themselves to this to save them. Mm-hmm. And what I would say, and I don't say this to be mean, but if your church insists on getting together and the virus starts to spread among your congregation, then stay home and pray about it. Yeah. Don't be involving other people who had no part of this. Stay home and pray about it.
Oh yeah, I'd go further and say
that's my.
If you were intentionally dumb like that, and you had to make your point and you had to make your stand, then don't call emergency services either, because you did it to yourself.
Exactly right.
I was going to say there's many other ways that you can be religious. You can pray, you can read the Bible, you can, there's plenty of religious services on YouTube. There's plenty of them live streaming. Just how about these churches take some of the money and buy a streaming camera and stream it? There you go.
Absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree with that. And here again, I I want to say this is an anti-religion. I'm not any organization who claim they don't want the government in their bedroom. They don't want this or that, and that's fine. I'm 100% okay with that. But then as soon as they get into trouble, okay, why isn't the government helping us?
Oh yeah.
So it's either one or the other.
I was going to say they don't want the government in their bedroom, but the second, Jim and Steve move in next door and put up that pride flag, government better be in their bedroom, and that's not a new thing.
Yeah. Of course, this is an old theme of mine. Any ideology, I don't care if you're extreme right or left, is loaded with hypocrisy.
Oh, yeah.
It's really how things fit your agenda is really what it's become. Speaking of social justice warriors and speaking of all the political correctness, this is our last point here. I know that a lot of people claim that calling COVID-19 the Chinese virus is racist. Now, I want to be clear. I'm sure there are people out there. There's bad people out there. There are racist people who will take any opportunity to take any person of color and make it a disparaging thing. There's absolutely no question about that. But there comes a point when you have to understand the origins of something, that these wet markets in China, and there's a lot of speculation about how this virus came from eating bats. All right. And the wet markets have sanitation problems, being sanitary and so forth. Well known. The wet markets have a lot of issues. And of course, they eat all kinds of exotic things. Exotic, that's a funny word. We kind of use that word when we don't.
Right.
We would say it's pretty bad stuff.
I was going to say, I'm sure to them, eating an entire pint of Ben & Jerry's Cherry Garcia is probably an exotic thing. So, I mean,
Exactly. And that's what I was going to point out. It's one thing to point out some sort of a part of your diet that may be part of your culture. And I would say, you have to tread lightly on that. But here's the difference. SARS, where did that come from?
China.
Bird flu, where did that come from? Yeah, all the same place. Okay. Now, at some point, when somebody has, when a certain country or certain region has a cultural part of their diet that is impacting the health of the rest of the world, at some point, you have to say, hey, what are you guys doing? It would be like you said with the Ben & Jerry's. If eating cheeseburgers every day here in the United States, big, greasy, thick cheeseburgers every day, somehow caused a pandemic every couple years, I wouldn't have any problem saying, hey, this American virus launching has got to stop. So what's your take on that? I know you're kind of against the political correctness, generally speaking. What's your take on this one?
Well, you do know that since 2016, when a certain president was elected, we're no longer allowed to have a sense of humor, right? It's been outlawed by the
absolutely.
community. I've heard nicknames for the COVID thing that I thought were funny. I mean, it's harmless. It's not like, they're calling it like the CHINK flu or something like that. Like one that I heard was the Kung flu. I thought that was funny.
Yeah.
And then there's the people who are a little bit more vicious. There's the boomer remover, which, that's a little uncalled for. But I mean,
yeah. Oh, sure.
It's still a good play on words. It's humorous. People aren't saying it seriously that they want every boomer out there to die. And if you think that, you're an oversensitive idiot who needs to go outside.
Exactly.
I mean,
sure.
I'm kind of a weird amateur type comedian, and the things people get offended for or over it nowadays, it's like, does it really impact your life? Like you heard somebody say the word Kung Flu and it gave you a panic attack, and now you got to go like kiss like 9 Chinese people's feet to repent your white race or whatever it is. I mean, it's just shut up. And the thing is, Twitter isn't real life. That's where a lot of this stuff comes from, is these people on Twitter who put out 200 tweets a day who have no real life at all except to sit around and church lady and language police everybody else, I mean, and the thing is, too, is that a lot of comedy is inherently, a little bit punching down or a little bit racist, I mean, that's just how it is. People pointing out stereotypes and stuff like that. Like the other day, one of my black coworkers was, I was marking down fried chicken. My black coworker comes over and he's like, what you doing with fried chicken? I was like, oh, I'm marking it down. You want some? And he's like, oh, you're just saying that all black people eat is fried chicken and watermelon? I was like, yeah, because both are delicious, dude. We both just laughed, and that was the end of it. There was no going to HR to cry about that I was burning a cross in his yard or whatever. And, it's just people have no sense of humor anymore, and it's really sad, dude. I mean, You can't make a joke.
Yeah, stereotypical humor is very hard to get away with. Yeah,
it is. And, I realize times have changed and all that. But as I said, a lot of this outrage that you see from these SJWs comes from Twitter. And these people, too, like, you ever see, like, they're like, oh, boycott this movie. They didn't have enough gay people in it or whatever. All these people who are saying they're going to boycott these movies or these video games or whatever weren't going to go to the movie or play the video game in the first place. And I think a lot of places are now kind of figuring this out and going, you know what? These people weren't going to spend money here, so screw them. Let them have their stupid little opinion. Everybody else, all the normal people are going to go enjoy their lives, and that's that. I mean, it's just... It's overblown. It irritates me.
And people make connections sometimes that aren't necessarily racist. Like when you have a Chinese restaurant that can't sell its food because people think they're going to get the coronavirus from it.
Right.
That's more ignorance than it is anything else. And it's the same ignorance that won't let people buy the Corona beer. Because they might get the coronavirus from it.
Don't get me started on that.
They just make these connections in their mind out of fear. I don't know that necessarily that it has a racist strand.
Right.
It's just it's ignorance that they connect these dots, like Corona beer and coronavirus have no connection.
I was the first one.
No connection whatsoever.
The Corona beer thing, everybody freaked out about that. I was the first one to say, hey, go ahead, mark it down. I'll buy the entire pallet, dude. I hadn't eaten Chinese food in probably about 6 months or so. I've eaten Chinese food 3 times since this quarantine thing happened. Because I want to support my local business owner. He's a good dude. I like him a lot. The guy who does Chinese food in my town. And
absolutely.
He even gave me free soda last time. He was like, hey, good to see you. I was like, what's up, man? I'll never understand the outright bigotry. It's like, just hate people because they're morons, not because of what color they are.
Exactly. There's a place that I go to that my wife and I go to here in town. We tried to get carry out from them, and unfortunately they were closed. They're closed during this whole thing because they just gave up. And, they're Asian Americans, and I'm sure a lot of restaurants are in that situation. Not all restaurants can survive on carry out.
And that's one thing that bothers me.
And they certainly can't support a full staff.
Right. I have kind of my own little conspiracy theory, if you want to hear it.
Okay.
I honestly think
absolutely go right ahead. We'll close with that.
This COVID thing was kind of an excuse for the richer types and the people in power to shut things down a bit and see what we will tolerate in terms of, say, dipping their toes into martial law. And then when all these businesses go out of business, and this has happened in the past. This happened after 9/11 in New York City. This happened after the housing crash in 2008. Well, when all these businesses suddenly have these open properties that the business owner, had to bail out from, who comes in and swoops up all that real estate and puts all their chain stores in and does all that, the ones who can afford to do it. And I think this, I don't know if this was directly a deliberate ploy to destroy a lot of small businesses, but it kind of really seems like it. It's happened before. So we're going to keep an eye on that.
Well, you could certainly make the argument. Yeah, you could certainly make the argument that it may not have been caused by something like that, but now that it happened, we're going to take advantage of it.
Opportunistic, yes.
You could certainly make that argument.
Kind of like how 9/11 was kind of an excuse to put the Patriot Act into place. I mean, I am kind of on the side of the people who are talking about, and I know that a lot of people brush this off as, oh, well, that's a stupid right-winger thing to say. But I mean, I really do fear for our civil liberties when this kind of thing happens. I mean, what's the government going to tell us we can't congregate about or protest against or whatever next? I mean, it doesn't have to be a virus.
Yeah, well, you had mentioned big cities.
Mm-hmm. It's the big cities that are really being affected. Yes, in big cities, I'm like, yes, of course, shut it all down. But I mean, we're in middle America, where you're not seeing that many cases. Yeah. And so why do we have to go through all these, all this, what I think is kind of excessive shutdown and whatnot when we're getting one case in the entire county of 50 to 100,000 people? I mean, I just feel like it shouldn't have been uniform everywhere. It should have really been done on a state or county by county basis. And it kind of wasn't. It was just once the first domino fell, all of them did. I don't know, man. Yeah, that's an interesting point. But where I was going with the big cities, if you take something like New York and the subways where people would travel shoulder to shoulder, what's going to happen when we try to get back into business? You couldn't have a subway with people standing 6 feet apart. No.
I mean, you know how many they can barely move everybody on time as it is.
Right.
So it's going to be an interesting time ahead. That is for sure. And we'll have to, maybe have this discussion sometime again in the future to see how things have progressed.
Oh yeah, and really the ball is up in the air.
But anyway, Jack,
if you think about it, I mean, what if we are because everything's like slated to open or reopen on May 1st? Well, what if that was a little bit too early and we're going to see another huge spike in cases? Are they going to shut it all down again? Are they going to?
And that's why they're going to do it in stages, I'm sure.
Yeah. So I don't know. It'll be interesting.
They're going to have different categories of opening. Yeah. Jack, very much. We've been listening to Jack Casey on the program today. Jack, I want to thank you for coming on the program and talking this through a little bit. Thank you very much.
Oh yeah, of course. We didn't touch on everything I want to talk about, but hey. Maybe we'll leave that for next time.
Absolutely. We'll leave that for next time. I want to thank the audience as well. Thank you very much for tuning in to the podcast. Just a little reminder, you can find the Billy Dees podcast pretty much on all the major podcast platforms. And you can follow me. You can tweet me on Twitter. You have to be nice now at Billy Dees. That's kind of my social media home. And I have links in my bio to some of the other things I have going on. Feel free to check that out. The Billy Dees podcast and at Billy Dees on Twitter. Jack, thank you very much for being on the program today.
Oh, of course, man. Anytime. Just give me a call. I'll jump right on. If you want to find me on Twitter, I'm kind of a Twitter noob. I haven't used it much, but I'm trying to use it more. It's at Jack Casey 8542. Check
out Jack and tweet him too. And be nice to him too.
Right? No, honestly, I don't care.
You can disagree, but I don't. Oh, okay, very good. Well,
you be mean to me
I don't respond to the negativity, and I have gotten it. All right. Well, thanks again, and thank you for at home, in your car, on your phone, wherever you may be. Thank you very much for listening to the podcast. Well, hello, everyone. I am Billy Dees from the self-titled Billy Dees podcast. You can find me on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, and many more of the best podcast networks. Join me for my commentary and interviews. Follow me on Twitter, real easy to find, at Billy Dees. I am Billy Dees. I'd love to have you listen in.